So the valve clearance is coming in massive, about 40 thou on some of the inlet valves. So I have a better rocker shaft on its way. So what I'm after doing is, I'm after spraying some penetrating oil down into the valve guides, and I'm after going over with a plastic hammer. So I'll do that again, so you can hear if a plastic hammer seems to be or a brass hammer seems to be the best job for this. And I'm just making sure that each one of the valves isn't stuck. Now I know they're not stuck, but some of the symptoms I've been having, like the popping out the exhaust, especially when the engine's decelerating, kind of points towards either a weak valve spring or a sticky valve. Now I had all these valves out, the head off, and it might have overlooked one or two with a bit of crud built up in the bottom of them, a bit of carbon. So what I've just started doing is literally running along, literally let the hammer just bounce on it, just literally fall. So I want a good sharp. So I'm actually using very, very, very little force. It's literally just hopping up and down, and making sure all of them valves are moving. I'm watching the spring, making sure there's no broken valve springs. I'm just noticing the differences in them. Some of them are a sharper reaction when you hit them. There's a sharper spring in them. But that one there seems to me to be a weaker spring. This one here seems to be fairly sharp. This one's middling. That was the weak one. I felt was a bit weak. That one's good. It's good. Little weaker. But then again, I think the inlet valves are going to be a little bit weaker for some reason. I think the exhaust valves are higher. I've measured each one of these with my vernier calipers for heights, and we're coming in cylinder 1 inlet 32.08, exhaust is 34 mil. So you can see them there, inlets, there's a bit of a pattern between 32 and 33, and then the exhausts are between 33 and 34, all mostly around 33.5 mil. So what I did then was working on the inlet valves first, because they're a narrower valve stem. Let's put on this. These are very hard valves, so this is not going to, this vice grips is not going to damage them at all. And just get a feel for them. I remember these valve seats in the head were really good, really good. I lapped them in again. This is the one I felt was a little bit weak, and it definitely does turn a lot easier. But there's no screeching or anything like that, at least. If they were anyway sticky in the valve guides, you'd hear a bit of screeching. But this one, on the other hand, is a lot stiffer. And I've already worked on this. And there was a lot of screeching going on. And this is after me spraying down penetrating oil. So, and that vice grips is starting to twist on it. So that one needs a bit of attention. That bio. This one I haven't actually put the vice grips on it yet. Yeah, that feels good. It's turning. This bio here needs a bit more love. So I'm going to spray a bit more of oil on that and then keep twisting it. The second-hand rocker shaft has arrived, and this has way better rocker arm faces than mine, and I can't really feel much wear at all of any left to right on them. They're really good. The bushings on them are really good. So I'm happy with that. And one of the difference between this and the TVO one has this bolt on it. So I'm going to give this a quick clean in the parts washer. There is the one that was in the engine there, and these definitely do feel a lot more worn, but that wasn't the issue. It was the rocker arm faces, and this is they're just too worn. divots, I think they call them, and the valve wires into them. And some of them are actually a little bit catchy as well. There's a bit of a... Oh no, that's meant to be in it. I feel that in there. So they do look identical, and it'll benefit from a bit of a clean up, and I'll blow out all of them holes there for the oil to flow through, and especially that hole there that allows oil into the rocker shaft. So that's the next job. Give it a good clean out. The rocker shaft is already getting a bit of a clean. I got this from Tyrone Tractors, so I dealt with Rodney, and it was well packaged, as you can see in the back. That's the rocker cover that was on the tractor. It was covered in this foamy kind of stuff, and lovely to deal with. Tyrone Tractors, quickly dispatched, arrived safe and sound, no damage at all, of course, and yeah, I'm very happy with it. It's a good quality part. So one thing I do want to check, just a quick check, is this bolt here. If that's loose, you lose oil pressure in the rail. So it's worth just checking him for tightening, and he's going to be imperial. So it's actually 11:30 seconds. That's good and tight. It's a strange size for a Ferguson. So that's tight. So I've given it a good wash out, and I've given it a blowout with the gun and the compressor. So I'm just going to poke some wire down and make sure all them holes are clear. I'm sure they are. It's just to make sure, as when you blow in the gun with the air gun, and the air goes out, air and the kerosene and diesel that was washed with kind of flies everywhere, so it's hard to see exactly where it's coming from. So I'll get a bit of wire and give them a poke through. That's just to make sure that it's gone. There's nothing obstructing them. Shouldn't be. It's a nice clean part now, in fairness. A little bit of surface rust on the rocker arms. Do no harm at all. Yeah, you can hear that. You can feel it. Actually, feel that rubbing on the rocker shaft itself. So that's okay. So after that, a little bit of check for wear. This is really good. Really tight. Basically, that one a slight bit, but a lot better than my old one. Yeah. So I'm happy with that. So what I'm doing over here is I am making sure that the push rods, I'm turning the engine with the handle, and I'm making sure that the cam followers aren't stuck, getting a little bit sticky. So I'm turning the engine, watching the rotor arm on the distributor, and I am keeping this pressed down. I'm waiting for the cam follower to come up, and you see this rising, and then this kind of sticks in the cam follower very slightly. So I'm trying to keep it held up, then turn the engine over, and then try and push this down myself by hand to make sure that it's going back, it's meeting the cam without getting stuck. Last night's video, which is actually probably going to be part of this video, was me checking that none of these were stuck. A few of them were a little bit, they were kind of screechy when you were turning them. Now I think a lot of that was actually just the spring, and it was actually turning. So you can turn the springs fairly handy on this. These are, I have a feeling these springs are a little bit on the weak side. I know that Ferguson 20 diesel has two springs, one inside the other. A higher compression engine, of course, probably 17:1 compared to around about 6.5. So if I decide to go and get this engine overhauled fully, I'll definitely invest in a set of new valve springs. just to ensure that they're kept pushing up. If they're pushed up, get pushed up under the right tension, they'll push against the rocker arm and then make sure that whatever valve clearance you've set will be most likely stay that way. Because as I was saying earlier, what's happened with this one is you set the valve, especially on this intake here, you set the valve clearance, and then after about half an hour running you hear it getting tappity again, you put in your feeder gauge and it's about 35 thou, should only be with 10. So that's what I'm trying to work out, what is causing the valve clearance after being set to increase so much. And some of the other ones weren't great. They all seem to be happening on intake valves, strange enough. The exhaust valves have a rotator cap that sits on that, and they have a wider surface because of that, so they're not wearing the rocker arm that much compared to these. So look, I'll keep my investigations going anyway. What I'm going to check is that these studs holding down the rocker shaft are all the same length, give or take. So that one's a millimetre higher, that one's the same as the second one, that one's a millimetre higher. So I'm going to go on just to make sure that they're tensioned down. Mind you, there's plenty of tread on them, so they should be fine. It's just, I'm just trying to eliminate everything. I want that rocker shaft kept down. I'm after screwing all the lock nuts off these adjusters. As you probably saw on the rocker shaft that was on the tractor, the treads on some of these were very bad. Where on this rocker shaft, the treads are very good. Each one of them has no damage. Even on the spare rocker shaft I have, some of these adjusters were all, the treads were actually stripped in places, and then the actual flat heads as well for putting your screwdriver in were damaged, whereas there's not one of these damaged at all. So I'm very happy so far with this part, really am. So what is the next thing to do? I can put back on them lock nuts, of course. I just gave it a quick rub on sandpaper there, just to make sure there was no burrs, anything like that from storage or whatever. I might have just put a burr in it, that would cause it to sit a little bit high. So I'm going to do a little bit more of that. 2 sheets of sandpaper side by side, run it over and back and whatever way you want to try and just make sure that there's no burrs on it. That'll be the next thing. I'll give it a little bit more of that, I think. So what I'm doing to fit this is, these are all just on hand height. So I went through 1, 3, 4, 2 I have to do yet. So what I do is I screw down, I do it on hand height, but it's always easier to tighten than it is to loosen them. That one I tightened up because it was done, but I see one of the valve, the push rods here is missing. So what I'll do is loosen that off, make sure it's in, make sure that's in. Leave all the rest of them done nice and loose. Just up hand tight, nip it down, get the nut and get the spring washer. This is just a dry one, this is all going to be coming off again. So I want to give it a fine clean in the parts washer. Just nipping it up by hand. So we're on 1, 3, 4, 2. So it's come around to 2. So I'll put in my screwdriver. That's it there. Fits into the slot. Little hole underneath the starter. So 1, 3, 4, 2. I have to give it this. It feels like there's fair compression on this engine. And then in it goes. What I do then is screw these down into the push rods. Just give it a bit of valve clearance to start with. The lock nuts are off these still, because I want to give them a quick spin down by hand. Give it loose. Plenty of valve clearance. By doing it this way, I've never really had to do anything like this before in an engine, because on the engine I was working on, I always had the valve clearance fairly right on it. So I suppose when I took over rocker shaft, these adjusters were probably about right. These are just getting tighter there now as the rocker cover is, the rocker shaft is getting tightened down here. So I'll give all of these a bit of a loosen, because I did leave a small bit of valve clearance, but I suppose I'm tightening down the actual shaft now. It's going to take up that. I just put plenty on of valve clearance in it, and tighten these down by hand for the simple reason being that I was turning the engine. I didn't want that to be bending push rods. I checked all the push rods; none of them are bent, so that's good. Make sure all of these are nice and loose when I tighten down this rocker shaft. So I've gone through each one and through the firing order, so there shouldn't be. Everything was only hand tight, so nothing should be getting bent. Now I tighten down this. These probably need to come up a bit today. Yeah, so taking my time, a better screwdriver. Nipping things up slowly. I don't want anything under pressure at the moment, other than the 4 nuts here. Nice and loose stuff. Nice and loose when we're tightening up the Now I don't know, is this going to make a whole lot of difference? I mean, valve clearance keeps increasing, you would wonder. They're all nice and loose as well, so that's what we want. Because now I can go through the firing order again, 1, 3, 4, 2, and make sure that I don't have to tighten these up. This is coming off. I'm only going to be turning it over by hand. Make sure to do the valve clearances again fairly, not too fussy, but just to get them set. Turn the engine over a few times by hand, and then when I'm happier, I'll take out this, give it a good last clean blowout, and I'll be able to use my solenoid then to turn over the engine, as at least I don't have to have the ignition on then. So I have it all fitted, and I've turned it over a few times with the starting handle. I've set my valve clearances, and I've turned it over with the solenoid, and then I've checked it again by hand, turning the engine over, putting the screwdriver in, 1, 3, 4, 2, checking and checking and checking, and it seems to be fairly well set there at the moment. So I have put in this pipe. This pipe was blocked. It was a spare pipe I had, because the fact it's blocked means it won't be able to draw air, and that saves me having to put the rocker cover on. So I can now go and fit the fuel tank, hitch up my fuel, and I should be able to run it without the rocker cover on. I might just sit it over it just to stop any splash. Run it for a while, take it off, recheck valve clearances, paying particular attention to this lad here that liked to increase valve clearance. Now I know I fitted a different push rod. I'm after going to fit the original one back in, because what I was thinking what happened with the other one I fitted was it was slowly wearing in and taking the shape of the cam follower and maybe even the adjuster ball, and it was, as it was wearing in quickly, it was slowly increasing the valve clearance. So that's where I'm going to leave it tonight. I'll take up tomorrow evening with the fuel tank on and give it a start and a run, and then stop it and recheck the valve clearances, and hopefully this pipe will work. If it does, I'll cut it off here, keep it for use again, and I'll tidy it up a bit of liquid metal or something, so I don't have this sticking out. But it's no big deal. If it does the trick, it'll be handy for this type of a job. Right, so we're set up for a start. So I'll bring the camera back a bit, because it'll probably be fairly loud, because this will be a cold start and it hasn't been started for a while. It might be a bit smoky because I put a good bit of penetrating oil down the valves, down through the guides. So You see, does this work as well? It is blocked, so it should start. Fuel is on. That sounds lovely and quiet. It did sound like this before with the last rocker shaft, and then it slowly started getting loud. So I'm going to get this warmed up. And then, when that's warmed up, switch it over to TVO, and we'll see does that ticking tappet sound start coming back into it. So the tappet sound is fairly minimal there at the moment. As I said at least twice before in these videos, after I set the valve clearance, if it keeps sounding the way it sounds, I'll be very happy. But the problem was that it didn't. The valve clearance will get bigger and bigger and it will start tapping. So we'll see what happens. So we're on TVO now, we've heated up. Tappets sound nice and healthy, a little bit louder, but I suppose they're all just wearing into each other. Them little ball ends on the adjusters and all of that. And I'm just checking now that everything is getting oiled. I didn't pre-lube this so that I could test and make sure that oil is coming out of everything. Yeah, there seems to be oil and all that. Now it isn't that long running, so I wouldn't expect it to be. So straight away you can see that it's definitely it must be on cylinder number 1, I'd say, is it? Near enough, I'd say. 1 or 4, yeah. So it's definitely a recheck needed. So I'm going to do that again, recheck. I'm happy now that there's oil getting there to all of them. So it looks anyway, and that's brilliant. I'm not going to put more oil on them now because I want to keep an eye on them. So I'm going to do another recheck, readjustment, and then I'll start it up again and see what it sounds like. So valve clearance done again, and it sounds better than it ever sounded. So we'll see how long it stays sounding like that. I don't mind doing it again as long as it stays good. We don't hear a tap, 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 tap coming back into it. But you can actually hear the fan belt over the engine sticking over there very happily, just under 500 revs per minute. It's up to temperature. It doesn't have the heat shield on, of course, but we'll see what it's like now in a few minutes. Okay, so far so good. Took it for a few spins up and down the shed, led up the clutch. The work I did on the governor seems to be working very well. It seems to be responding. If you jump the clutch, it gives it a bit more juice. It seems to be the happiest there at that tick over. about 600 revs, staying up at temperature. I adjusted the main jet a little bit, pulled the throttle back sharp to see how it responded. I think because the valve clearance is different now, it's better, and because the rocker shaft is better, the engine's a little bit different, so I just had to fine tune things a little bit, especially on the main jet. So I went a little bit too rich, I went a little bit too lean, I found somewhere in the middle. So it seems to be happy there. It's very quiet. So it's just going to be a matter now of taking off the tank, tightening down the rocker cover. After I'm happy, I'll give it one more check with the valve clearance. Run it through 1342 fire and order, and just have a look at the oil situation, make sure it looked like oil was getting there, just make sure there's plenty of oil getting to all of them holes in the rocker arms. And I'm struggling to say, and I'm hesitant to say, but I would hope that that might be it. If it says sounding like this, as I said before, I'd be very happy, because it's never sounded as good. It's really, really quiet, really happy. So we'll see.